an evil that great in this beautiful world, does it matter what the cause?
Yes, because it's our job to stop it.
We were first introduced to the Giant in the David Lynch-directed Season 2 premiere of Twin Peaks. The mysterious Giant, who seemed to act as some type of spiritual guide for Cooper, was initially and usually preceded by an appearance from the kind and cheerful elderly waiter at the Great Northern, also frequently known as Senor Drool Cup, compliments of Albert. The Giant provided Cooper with various clues and insights pertaining to the mystery of who killed Laura Palmer. The initial clues, when Cooper was wounded and in need of medical attention, included the man in a smiling bag, the owls are not what they seem, and without chemicals, he points. The Giant took Cooper's ring, dropped another clue about Leo, and made a vague mention about the third man. As promised by the Giant, all of these things proved true. The smiling bag contained the dead body of Jacques Renault, which in turn pointed toward Leland. Without chemicals, he points involved Philip Gerard and an unusual combination of the drug haloperidol, which he had been taking to suppress his inhabiting spiritual parasite Mike, a former ally of Bob. The clue about Leo being arrested in Hungry Horse provided Mr. Johnson with an alibi the night of Teresa Banks' murder, and Cooper had indeed forgotten something, the note left by Audrey Horne when she infiltrated One-Eyed Jack's undercover on her own accord. But the most interesting clue with the most depth was the owls are not what they seem, which seems to have multiple layers. In its more abstract form, there is a mystery surrounding the owls of Twin Peaks, who perhaps act as seeing-eye creatures or even vessels for various lodge entities, black and white. But in simpler terms, it referred to the message for Cooper. The gibberish received from deep space monitoring as part of the Major's work was interrupted when Cooper was shot, with the message, "The owls are not what they seem," followed by Cooper's name repeated several times. Added depth pertaining to this message carries over into Season 3, and more on that later. Back to the Giant. He appeared in 4 more episodes following the Season 2 premiere. He'd appeared at the Roadhouse to inform Cooper that it was happening again when Leland was murdering his niece Madeline. Then after Cooper was given an assist by the kind and cheerful elderly waiter, Senor Drool Cup, he remembered what Laura had whispered to him in his dream. "My father killed me," at which point the Giant returned Cooper's ring, this again happening at the Roadhouse. And once more he'd take form at the Roadhouse, this time providing Cooper with a nonverbal warning as he danced with his beloved Annie. And finally, we last see him in the Season 2 finale, once again preceded by Drool Cup, where the Giant is seated next to the man from another place, declaring one and the same. That was the full extent of the Giant appearing during the initial run, and he did not appear at all in Fire Walk with Me. Indeed, we do not see the Giant again until the triumphant return 25 years later in the Season 3 premiere, or do we? It is not entirely clear whether the character we see in Season 3 is in fact the same character. But for our purposes here, it is safe to assume that either it was indeed the same character, as I tend to believe, or at the very least they were allies employing similar tactics working toward the same goal. After all, he was dressed similarly enough, he was portrayed by the same actor, and once again, right out of the gate, the Giant, who later refers to himself as the Fireman, is once again providing Cooper with a slew of cryptic clues and instructions. Listen to the sounds. It is in our house now. Remember 4:30, and Richard and Linda, 2 birds with 1 stone, and finally that Cooper was, quote, far away. That was the first and only time we see Cooper and the Giant together in Season 3, and I believe this in itself is perhaps significant. The Fireman would make 3 more appearances, and also be included in an additional key mention. After the first successful test of a nuclear weapon, the Fireman is alerted, where he sees the aftermath of the evil entity that spawned its demon seed Bob. In turn, the fireman levitates and ultimately exudes a golden aura that produces the elegant Laura Palmer orb, which his companion then kisses before sending it off to Earth. Later, the fireman recruits Andy and shows him a very important picture show, where Andy is shown a series of events involving the creation of Bob, with a great emphasis on Laura Palmer and the fact that Cooper was divided and conquered by his shadow self. We also learn that the fireman was instrumental in the origin of Hulk-Hand Freddy. And finally, we see him intervene and disrupt the best-laid plans of Mr. C. The interesting thing here is that the fireman apparently received some type of an assist on the matter, seemingly in collaboration with the essence of Major Briggs. Season 3 showed us that the Giant was not merely a spiritual guide for Cooper. The idea that this is all he was made some logical sense way back then based on what we knew about Cooper and the Giant from the original run. But in Season 3 we learned that, in reality, Cooper was just one of several, if not many pawns he was using in his four-dimensional chess game, designed to extinguish the fires erupting at the hands of more corrupt entities. While we do not know the full scope of objectives pertaining to the fireman, we know that he opposed Bob with designs for his destruction. Still acting as a vessel for Bob, Mr. C wanted to find Judy, which apparently involved the home of Sarah Palmer. But the fireman pulled the old switcheroo and instead sent Mr. C to the Twin Peaks Sheriff's Station, with Mr. C none the wiser to the shifty maneuver. This led Mr. C directly into the fireman's trap, where he had previously laid the foundation for Hulk-Hand Freddy and Andy and Lucy. Andy's vision relayed Lucy into play when she figured out cell phones and properly identified and gunned down the imposter, which paved the way for Freddy to fulfill his destiny and destroy Bob, allowing Cooper to banish his shadow self into the Lodge realm where he appeared dormant, but definitely not annihilated altogether. But the fireman's objective to defeat Bob apparently was fulfilled, and it involved contributions from Freddy, Andy, Lucy, and also Cooper, who seemed to perfectly understand his limited role in all this. This is somewhat ironic, because we never saw what happened when the fireman explained this role to Cooper, and yet everything worked out flawlessly here. But regarding the instructions the fireman provided Cooper that we did see, that plan seemed to fail and fail miserably. And even if it did succeed, Cooper was a confused mess who had forgotten all about Richard and Linda and didn't even know what year it was. But when it came to destroying Bob, Cooper was cool, calm, collected, and on point, knowing exactly what to expect, where it all worked out perfectly with a storybook ending. But the interesting thing here is, what the hell does Major Briggs have to do with the fireman? And why and how was Briggs playing such a pivotal role in temporarily capturing an unwitting Mr. C so that the fireman could pull the old switcheroo? When we first see Major Briggs in Twin Peaks, he does not appear to be anyone particularly special in the grand scheme. He was Bobby's father, and it felt like that's all that he was. But like many fresh characters we were introduced to during the initial run, Briggs soon proved to be far more than what we were initially led to believe. In the case of Garland Briggs, in fact, this was especially true. Early on, he seemed like an out-of-touch father unable to get through to his grieving son, insisting he stop smoking with no impact on Bobby, and even going so far to attend family counseling with Dr. Jacoby. The Major had finally had a touching moment when he described his vision to Bobby, where father and son genuinely bonded. When the log lady's log had something to tell the Major, she translated, and the log urged Briggs to deliver the message. Briggs understood, and we would soon learn a little bit about his work when he did indeed deliver the message to Cooper. The owls are not what they seem. Cooper, Cooper, Cooper. And even more Coopers if you look closely. Among his many tasks, the Major maintained deep space monitors, where they decoded and examined space garbage gibberish, and the big message was delivered, which was first received right around the time Cooper was shot. During the initial run, it felt like Briggs was just a messenger, but subsequent events suggest otherwise. And this is important because it is the first instance of tangible proof of a connection between Major Briggs and the Giant. By extension, we know that the log lady's mysterious log was also a connected entity. After Briggs delivered the message to Cooper, we would not see him again for 7 entire episodes. And when we do finally see him again, he is escorting Drool Cup to the roadhouse. And Cooper was expecting them, as the clock had just struck 3 and Cooper told the Major he was right on time. Cooper expected this, much like he had expected exactly what would later happen in Season 3 when Hulk-Hand Freddy overpowered Bob. Why the hell was Cooper expecting Briggs here? It may be worth mentioning that earlier in the same episode, Drool Cup saw Coop at the Great Northern and informed him he was getting warmer. But the greater point here is that this is more evidence of a connection between Major Briggs and the Giant. The mere fact that after delivering the message to Cooper, which first reveals a connection with the Giant, the very next time we see him he is with Drool Cup, the kind and cheerful elderly waiter who has an undeniable connection with the Giant. Drool Cup pushed Cooper over the finish line with his tricky business with the gum. What makes this interesting is the fact that the clue about the gum coming back in style did not originate from the Giant or Drool Cup, but rather the man from another place. When you consider the only time we saw the Giant and the Arm on screen together, it was in the Black Lodge when the Giant told Coop one and the same. That is damn interesting. As soon as Drool Cup dropped the in-your-face gum clue, Cooper remembered his dream, which was actually a shared dream with Laura Palmer that took place months apart. The Giant then surfaced and returned Cooper's ring. After Leland died later that episode, Briggs appeared out of nowhere like an apparition. He dropped a quick Shakespearean line of wisdom, and then he just walks away after Cooper suggested it was their job to stop the cause of evil. Later, when Briggs and Cooper went on their fishing and camping expedition, the Major asks Coop if he ever heard of the White Lodge. But before they could have a meaningful discussion, Briggs vanishes in a flash that was preceded by a lurking owl when Coop was relieving himself, and we see a hooded figure during all the commotion. Betty Briggs would later explain that Garland had disappeared before in work-related matters, and the fact it happened in the woods was very significant. Major Briggs re-emerged 2 days later after he vanished, once again appearing out of nowhere like some ghostly apparition. The Major claimed to suffer from amnesia following his return, where he had 3 triangular markings behind the right ear. He remembered very little, but did recall seeing a giant owl. The owls are not what they seem. He gets lost in thought and becomes frightened when he asks if this was meant for the soul, his soul, which I believe is another potential link with the Giant involving his future. Briggs explains that despite being officially disbanded in 1969, that in an unofficial capacity Project Blue Book runs on, the Air Force investigation into unidentified flying objects. Briggs said they continue examining the heavens above, but also in the case of Twin Peaks, the earth below. When Briggs notes they are searching for a place called the White Lodge, someone comes in to deliver orders from Colonel Riley, and Briggs leaves with the 2 men sent to retrieve him. Briggs later returned to inform Coop and Truman that he did not believe the Air Force search for the White Lodge was pure, and states his belief that he was taken to the White Lodge, which in itself is yet another possible connection with the Giant. When we see him next, the log lady spots the marking on his neck. Together they visit Coop, and the log lady reveals a similar type of marking on the back of her leg, recalling that she had received the marking when she was 7 years old after she had been told she had disappeared in the woods. The log lady had also recalled a flashing light and the call of the owl. Briggs later corrects Andy on an inaccuracy with the owl cave painting, making it known he was familiar with the details and had dreamed it, and he agrees to provide Cooper with information regarding Wyndham Earle's involvement with Project Blue Book. Later, Briggs again is wandering around the woods like Tom Bombadil, and he is captured, drugged, and interrogated by Earle himself. Briggs admits he first saw the petroglyph in a dream, and his description sounds a bit similar to when Andy vanished to the fireman's castle. Briggs then resumes speaking to Earle, only he is speaking backwards in lodge talk. which translates out, "That gum you like is coming back in style, that gum you like." And again, that comment was originally spoken by the man from another place, and later repeated by Drool Cup. After Leo set Major Briggs free, Hawk tracked him down, and Briggs asks which way is the castle. This could perhaps be another link between Briggs and the Giant, and a possible reference to the Giant's castle, which looks an awful lot like Jack Rabbit's palace, which we will get back to. Cooper notes that Briggs had been shot up with haloperidol. Not only is this the same concoction that Philip Gerard used in order to suppress his inner Mike, but it had also been mentioned previously that Wyndham Earle himself had used the drug, where Cooper and Cole assumed it was to fake his insanity. To me, this leads further credibility to Briggs becoming confused and seeking a way to the castle. When Cooper questions if it was Wyndham Earle who had done this to him, still under the influence, Briggs replied, "It was God, I suppose." Briggs then informs Cooper that fear and love open the doors. The last time we see Major Briggs during the initial run is when Sarah relayed an important mysterious message to him, informing him, "I'm in the Black Lodge with Dale Cooper." Much debate exists over who sent the message to Briggs. Many have long theorized it was Wyndham Earle, but I never bought that. I do not see any motivation for it to be Wyndham Earle. One theory I previously liked was the recently deceased Dougie Milford, the man who handpicked Briggs to be his successor at Listening Post Alpha, where a lot of this was covered in the Secret History of Twin Peaks and the Final Dossier, where interestingly enough, Milford was rumored to have once been in possession of the Owl Cave ring. But the interesting thing here is, where in the past Briggs seemed to have a connection with the Log Lady, it was Sarah Palmer who delivered this message. I do wonder if this might not be another connection between Briggs and the Giant, because it is difficult to imagine who else might have the motive of relaying this message to Briggs. And while there is no evidence of Milford being in the lodge, we do have evidence that Drool Cup and the Giant were both inside the Black Lodge with Dale Cooper at some point exactly around the time that message was delivered by Sarah. Knowing what we know now regarding Season 3, the fact that Spooky Sarah delivered this message is damn interesting. The idea being that Spooky Sarah presumably was under the influence of Jiao Day, where Briggs was complicit in hoodwinking Mr. C when he sought to reach Judy. But that never happened, because of the Giant's meddling ways which led Mr. C to his disunion with Bob, which in theory corresponded with Cooper being reunited with his shadow self to again become whole. This ties in with the story Gordon Cole recalled, where Briggs informed Cole and Coop of the entity, the extreme negative force, Jiao Day. Cole mentioned that Philip Jeffries was onto this entity long ago, and that he no longer really exists in a normal sense. We don't know when this meeting of minds took place, but it was before Major Briggs disappeared, and it must have been before Cooper entered the Black Lodge, given Mr. C's complete lack of knowledge regarding Judy, where he sought out help from Jeffries. But the strange thing here is that Cole mentioned Cooper telling him about 2 birds with 1 stone, but we never heard that phrase until the Season 3 premiere. If Cooper told this to Cole before he entered the Black Lodge, then this plan must have been something that the Giant originally put into motion back in Season 2, perhaps when Briggs was doing his repeated vanishing act, traveling through time as a pawn in the Giant's 4-dimensional chess game. We are informed by Bobby that Cooper was believed to be the last man to see Briggs alive, and that Briggs was presumed to have died in a fire at the station. But we know that was actually Mr. C, and we know Briggs did not die. His unidentified headless body was eventually found 25 years later in Buckhorn, South Dakota, along with the severed head of Ruth Davenport. When Buckhorn police tried fingerprinting the dead body, it alerted the Air Force, and we learned that there had now been 16 access attempts for Briggs's fingerprints. Lieutenant Knox investigated and discovered that this time they had a body all right, that of a man the age Briggs would have been when he was presumed dead in the fire. Briggs should have been 72, not a man in his 40s. Briggs hadn't eaten in days, but he had a ring inside his stomach. A ring to Dougie with love from Janie E. As it turned out, Briggs had been hibernating in a place called the Zone. Bill Hastings recalled his encounter with the Major when he and Ruth found their way in. Briggs wanted the adventurous duo to obtain coordinates for him, to steal them from a secure military database. When they returned to give him the numbers, he started to float up saying, "Cooper, Cooper," before his head disappeared. Ruth was dead. When they later investigated the area, Gordon Cole peeked into the Zone like some type of wizard, and we saw the dirty bearded men on the staircase that we later see both Mr. C and Cooper ascend when they each visited Philip Jeffries. This perhaps suggests that the Major was hibernating in the vicinity of the same realm where we see Jeffries, and that stairwell is also tied into the Jumping Man, an entity that has some type of connection to Sarah Palmer. Hastings is killed, and Ruth's headless body is discovered. Based on Hastings' story, it is interesting that both times we see the Major in Season 3, he is nothing but a floating head. Cooper first sees the gigantic floating head of Major Briggs float by after he was banished to the realm of non-existence, where Briggs simply states, "Blue Rose." And later, of course, we see the gigantic floating head in cahoots with the Fireman, where the two sabotage and hoodwink Mr. C with the old switcheroo. But before the old switcheroo took place, the Major led Bobby Hawk and Sheriff Truman to his wife Betty, and she exclaimed he said this day would come, only she imagined it would be Harry instead of Frank. When they eventually received the message, they were told to bring soil, given a time with 2 dates, and it included the paper when Briggs first delivered the message to Cooper regarding the owls, and it was ripped in such a way that it provided the added meaning of 2 Coopers. But the inexplicable foresight from the Major again suggests an ongoing alliance with the Giant. This led the law enforcement trio along with Andy to Jack Rabbit's palace, the special place Bobby and his dad spent quality time together when Bobby was a kid. Bobby named it such, and it was near where the Major was stationed. This kicked off Andy's visit with the Fireman, which by proxy put Lucy into play to slay Mr. C, and it likewise brought the Shell, the eyeless woman, into play, who turned out to be Diane. And to reiterate, Jack Rabbit's palace looks almost exactly like the Giant's castle. When you think back to many of the mysterious circumstances surrounding Major Briggs in Season 2, it perhaps overlaps with the more profound mysteries he was mixed up with in Season 3, where against all odds, Major Briggs was a major player in Season 3, perhaps even the most important of them all. Betty stated that it was not unusual for Garland to disappear with work-related matters, and we saw him effectively vanish into thin air when he was camping with Cooper. Given all the strange stuff with the fingerprints, the hibernating, the floating head in the realm of non-existence, and finally his efforts in helping the Fireman pull the old switcheroo, it's clear he has an ongoing connection with the Fireman. And when you look back, there is strong evidence that this relationship dated back to at least the events of Season 2, and probably earlier, if not much earlier. When you look at Cooper, Briggs, and the Fireman, Cooper twice said someone was right on time. Back when the Major escorted Drool Cup to the roadhouse, when Drool Cup effectively solved the crime with the gum line, first mentioned by the man from another place, and later repeated by Briggs in Lodge Tongue. Then Cooper said Gordon Cole was right on time after Bob was defeated and Mr. C was banished, seemingly dormant. In both of those cases, while Cooper didn't do any of the heavy lifting, Drool Cup pushed him over the finish line, and a combination of Major Briggs, Hulk-Hand Freddy, Andy and Lucy, and the Fireman himself did all the heavy lifting. In both instances, Cooper merely had to be there, and he had to place the ring on his doppelganger's finger. But when Cooper was expected to do the heavy lifting, he failed. Or at the very least, he had no idea what year it was, and he hadn't a clue about the names Richard and Linda. Coop told the Fireman he understood, but unlike these other instances, Cooper had no idea what to expect. This is history repeating itself like so many other stories in Season 3. And with Cooper in particular, he went down the same path with Annie he had sworn he would never again venture after his fiasco with Caroline. I still believe, in the end, Mr. C, Cooper's inner darkness got the best of him when his 2 parts were reunited as one. He came up short when he first entered the lodge and faced his shadow self, and I believe he came up short here again in the end. There remains a very strong and compelling possibility that Mr. C was victorious in the end, and I likewise believe that Briggs was, in actuality, a more valuable asset to the Fireman than Cooper. If we go back to the four-dimensional chess analogy, where the fireman is doing his best to extinguish fires erupting because of more corrupt, powerful entities, and if Cooper was one of the fireman's primary pawns in the grand scheme, then my general feeling is the Major was at least a bishop or a knight, if not a rook, with Laura as the queen. But at the end of the day, whatever this master plan was between Briggs, Cooper, and Cole, I have little doubt that the plan must have originated from the fireman, as that's the first thing we see is him feeding cryptic clues to Cooper, and I assume he must have done so previously with Briggs, where I believe the evidence suggests Briggs may have been in the company of the fireman far more often than Cooper, where Briggs is to Cooper what Cooper is to Andy in that regard. Briggs was the one left to battle Mr. C in his union with Bob, while Cooper was tripping out in the lodge for 25 years. The fact that Major Briggs had that ring inside his stomach from Janie E., that implies that Briggs was aware of Mr. C's efforts to cheat his way out of returning to the Black Lodge. Meaning we know Briggs must have emerged from hibernation around the time the Dougie Tulpa first surfaced in 1997. And Briggs also acquired coordinates that Mr. C believed he wanted, leading to the old switcheroo. Everything worked here perfectly in the battle to defeat Bob. But in the battle to defeat Judy, not so much. In conclusion, I think back to the apparent philosophical difference Briggs and Cooper expressed back in Season 2.
An evil that great in this beautiful world. Does it matter what the cause?
Yes, because it's our job to stop it.
It might be fair to say that, when dealing with evil, Cooper was more eager to confront and remove it without necessarily understanding it, whereas Briggs was more apt to examine and understand the situation before acting, more inclined to cope with bad situations rather than trying to control them. In other words, for the fireman, extinguishing Bob, a lesser entity in my view, required a great deal of shifty maneuvering and a great deal of time and meddling to finally contend with the fire. But Bob was merely a byproduct of the greater evil, Jiao Day, perhaps a more powerful entity, perhaps even a doppelganger of sorts to the giant. In the end, Cooper is lost in a seemingly endless cycle with Laura Palmer, and the fact that he meddled in the past has forever cursed him, undoing any good they did destroying Bob in the original timeline. Unfortunately, love was not enough. Cooper tells Briggs it matters because it's our job to stop it. And Briggs looks at him before walking away as if to say, yeah, good luck with that, buddy. Have a clue what year it is when you try, bucko. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed, and have a wonderful night.
Row after row of gibberish, and all of a sudden, the owls are not what they seem.
The owls are not what they seem.
Later in the morning, Cooper. You, sir, were blessed with certain gifts. In this respect, you're not alone.
Someone is missing.
Excuse us.
Major Briggs, right on time.
Have you ever heard of the White Lodge?
The White Lodge.
Did he leave suddenly?
Yes, he did. We were speaking philosophically, and I left the campsite to answer the call of nature. When I returned, he was gone.
The fact that you were in the woods is very significant.
Do you remember anything else?
Very little, save for one disturbing image of giant owl.
Oh, God. Is this meant for the soul? My soul?
And that mark was on my leg.
We all three recall the light.
And also the call of the owl.
We are searching for a place called the White Lodge.
Major Briggs?
I've been expecting you.
I believe that during my disappearance, I was taken to the White Lodge. I can remember virtually nothing. As I remember, the line you're drawing should proceed downward, not across.
How did you know that?
It can be found, entered, and perhaps utilized in some fashion. The Dugpas have many names for it, but chief among them is the Black Lodge.
That the mule is going to come back in style.
That's my most favorite gum in the world.
That gum you like is going to come back in style.
Which way is the castle?
Was it Wyndham Earl?
He was God, I suppose. Fear and love opened the doors.
What's he saying? He said, fear and love open the doors. I'm in the Black
Lodge with again.
Cooper was the last person to see my father alive.
What's that?
Yeah. A few days after my dad died, my mom told me that Cooper had come by the house. And I guess Cooper left town pretty soon after that.
Nobody's seen or heard of him since.
And my dad died in the fire at his station the next day.
To Dougie, with love, Janie E.
Major Garland Briggs. All right. And how many is that?
This would be the 16th time.
16 hits in what? 25 years?
There's just one thing, sir.
What's that?
Actually, two things. The head is missing. And he's the wrong age.
What do you mean, Cindy?
Major Briggs would have been 72. As you know, we thought he died in a fire in that government facility outside Twin Peaks 25 years ago. About the age this man is now.
He just said, when they come to ask you about Agent Cooper, you give them this.
Before leaving Jack Rabbit's palace, put some soil from that area in your pocket. And 2 dates. And a time. Same time.
I was the one that named it Jack Rabbit's Palace.
He saw all this.
Well, consider this. Cooper knew Briggs. Cooper was around Briggs 25 years ago. And now Cooper shows up in this neck of the woods.
Cooper.
Two Coopers.
Cooper. Right before his head disappeared, it was something like no one has ever seen before. I've never seen anything like it. I've
I saw the bearded men. The same type Albert and I saw. Dirty, bearded men in a room.
Once you've got the glove on, go to Twin Peaks, Washington, United States of America. And there, you will find your destiny.
I am the Fireman. Very important, very important.
Twin Peaks Sheriff Station, this is Lucy speaking. Who?
Are you ready? That's right. And this is my destiny.
I understand. Richard. Linda.
An evil that great in this beautiful world.
What do you fear most in the world?
The possibility that love is not enough. Finally, does it matter what the cause?
Yes, because it's our job to stop it.
What year is this?
You know, Quasimodo predicted all this.